next speaker is Peter Koczan. He lives in Madison, Wisconsin, works as a system administrator for UW-Madison. In November 2006, he became the proud owner of a new Toyota Prius and has since focused on getting better fuel economy on the highway. And he took third place in the 2007 Hybridfest MPG Challenge. So please welcome Peter Koczan.
Thank you very much. I hope you all are having a good time, and thanks for coming out. As Jared had said, my name is Peter Koczan, and my talk is high speed, high efficiency, tips and tricks for getting maximum fuel economy on the highway, and advice on how to do it right. One of the big criticisms of hybrid cars is that they don't do too well on the highway. And I think that's a bit of an overblown criticism, because the Prius is rated at 45 mpg, and the next closest gas car is the Toyota Corolla, a compact, which gets 37 mpg. Smaller car, and somehow the Prius does 20% better. The next closest mid-size car is the Nissan Versa, which gets 33, and that's nearly 1/3 better. The Prius is nearly 1/3 better. It even does better than the super efficient Smart 4.2. Which is rated at 41, and it looks like and from my calculations, it looks like the average for most compact and mid-sized cars is about 30 mpg, so you're getting 50% better just out of a hybrid car. Additionally, Civic Hybrid is rated at 45 on the highway, and Civic itself is 36, so 25% better. So, it's true that you don't get as good of gains as you would in the city because the engine has to be running, but to say that a hybrid does no better than a gas car is very much so a misnomer. But that's not really what I'm here to talk to you about, because that would have been the entire speech if that's all I had to talk about. But what I'm here to talk about is techniques and attitude. With the right techniques and a good change in attitude, you'll be able to beat the new EPA easily, and probably the old EPA. So, without further ado, here we go. I apologize for the size of the slides, but thankfully they aren't key to your understanding of the material. They're just nice little visual fluff. So, the basics, and a lot of these will sound familiar because what works in the city does work on the highway. For instance, keeping tire pressure, keeping your tires properly inflated, even up to max sidewall, which is perfectly safe, perfectly warrantable. That's worth quite a bit on the highway. If you're working the terrain, there's a technique that's called driving with load, and that's probably the biggest thing that you can do on the highway. Basically, it means that you don't try to accelerate uphills, and you use gravity to help you downhills. Now, where exactly that works, what speed exactly you want to be going up a particular hill, depends, of course, on the hill and the traffic around you and your car. So it's a bit of an art. But if any of you, are any people out there bicyclists? And one of the things that you definitely don't do in a bicycle is you don't try to accelerate up a hill, because you just can't do it. The car is the same way, but unfortunately people don't really realize that the car is being worked so hard. The third one is anticipation, and you have no idea how difficult it is to find pictures of abstract concepts. Luckily I was able to find one of an old Nintendo game which looks like the cast of Full House playing Nintendo, but yeah, anticipation is key. It's not quite like the city where you're more anticipating traffic lights and flow of traffic coming off those traffic lights. On the highway, since most of the time people are keeping their speed at a steady state, you're more anticipating when they're going to reach you and and how you can best adjust your driving to meet their traffic flow. And also on-ramps and off-ramps, because that's a lot of places where people come in and there's a big speed differential. one, as it is managing climate control. So don't blast the AC if you don't have to, and if people are comfortable not doing that in there. Because in most cars it will rob power, and in Prius it will drain the battery. Primarily, the energy's got to come from somewhere, and it's best that if you can handle it, try not to blast the heat, try not to blast the AC as far as you can. A couple other basic things that I didn't bother to find pictures for is just removing weight from the car, just keeping spare tires out, making sure that you take off roof racks if you don't need them, again, standard stuff, and keeping up on maintenance. On the highway speeds, a lot more air is running through the filter, so if you have a dirty filter, that's a lot more problem. But the biggest thing that you can do is slow down. Speed kills miles per gallon. There's no two ways about it. As you can see from these graphs, and maybe you can't see the top one so well, but the basic trend is that as speed increases, say here's about 40 miles per gallon, they're getting about 70. As it goes up to about 67, you're getting more around 50, and 79, you get closer to 40. And this is a very popular picture of an unnamed car, unfortunately, that you can see quite clearly a drop-off just over 55 miles per hour. And the reason this happens is that wind resistance increases with the square of speed. It does not increase linearly. And therefore the power needed to push through the air increases cubically. So going twice the speed, there's 4 times as much air resistance, and you'll need 8 times as much power, roughly. So slow down. 55 is a good speed. 65 is decent. 70, you're really going to run into problems. Again, to those who are bicyclists, if you try to go fast, you really can't, because the wind's pushing against you so hard that unless you have a nice tailwind, you're going to be capping out, because, let's face it, humans aren't that aerodynamic. Or even to people who aren't bicyclists, think about a windy day. In 5-mile-an-hour wind, you're able to easily overcome it. In a 10-mile-an-hour wind, you're struggling a bit, and in a 20-mile-an-hour wind, you have to really, really work just to stay upright. And the same thing works in the car, but unfortunately, people don't feel it, again. And these things, smart use of heat and AC, just slowing down a little bit, and working terrain even mildly will get you up to 50 miles per gallon in a Toyota Prius. It's what my parents do, and they are by no means hypermilers, at least not to the extent that I am. There are a few advanced techniques that can get you to 60 and beyond. They're what I often do. I can usually get 65 on highway trips in decent weather, but I really don't have time to talk about them. Unless you guys want to be here for another 2 hours, and I think the other speakers would not appreciate that if I went into their time. And I also don't want to overwhelm any people who are new to this. So, and often they require at least a tachometer or a scan tool like Scan Gauge. You're welcome, Ron. Or if you have unusual intuition. And I don't have unusual intuition, so I don't think anyone else has. So if there are people who are curious, come talk to me after the talk, but I really don't have time to go into them right now. The next big thing is something that's been getting a lot of press, and it is a technique that will raise your fuel economy. However, it needs to be addressed, and that is drafting. The practice of following a different vehicle less than a safe following distance for the purpose of improving fuel economy. The short answer, don't. The long answer is don't, and here's why. There's another name for drafting. It's called tailgate. It's rude, it's inconsiderate, and it's dangerous. The difference is primarily semantic. Whereas drafting you do to maintain speed or improve fuel economy, tailgating is made to intimidate other drivers into doing what you want, or what they want to you. But it's the same mechanism by which it's accomplished, so don't. Good question. Officially, the safe following distance, I use the 2-second rule. So anything less than that would be considered drafting, close-in draft specifically. And that's what people often refer to when they talk about drafting. Thank you. The other reason that you shouldn't draft is it's really not worth it. I can usually get better numbers from other techniques or just slowing down, and I have a hard time finding a truck going the speed I want to anyway. Yeah, exactly. Pretty much. Yeah, that's my next point. That's exactly my next point, is that it's too dependent on other people's actions. That's one of the great things about hypermiling, all these other techniques, just slowing down, maintaining low engine load, is that you can do that yourself, outside of anyone else's intervention. But drafting requires the cooperation, whether intentional or unintentional, of other people. And that leads me into my last point, is that it's too stressful. Hypermiling to me is all about reducing stress. It's about having a nice relaxing drive and trying to get high numbers out of that without having to worry about being dangerous or having people consider me dangerous. So why, and people often use the straw man, is your life worth a few MPGs? No, it's not in terms of drafting. I certainly enjoy hypermiling, but drafting is legitimately dangerous, so don't do it. So you might even ask, if it's not worth it, if it's so dangerous, why am I even talking about it? For one thing, it's always good to have a fuller view of the information. You know the phrase, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing? Well, I wholeheartedly believe that. And in the case of drafting, if I don't mention something, it's often been touted as a great fuel-saving technique. But without a full, proper understanding of the dangers involved, the stresses involved, you don't get a good idea of... Basically, you become a greater danger to people on the road. So, and as I alluded to earlier, a lot of hypermiling opponents, and most recently the AAA, have been focusing on drafting as a hypermiling technique. And it needs to be countered because it's not an accepted practice. There are people who do it, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and probably a few of them will call themselves hypermilers, but it's not a recommended strategy, and I feel I need to address it. The other reason, and probably the most technical, is that it's possible to draft unintentionally. It's possible that due to imperceptible changes in speed, or someone cutting you off, that you suddenly lose that 2-second buffer. In much the same way that it's very dependent on other people's actions to draft, it's also up to other people whether or not you can get into a draft sometimes. So I want to be able to let you know what it is so that you can recognize it in case it does happen to you unintentionally, and also what you can do about it, which is pretty simple. Slow down a little bit and give yourself a buffer. That's really all you can do. Don't get into road rage. It's not good for fuel economy. But I guess this talk brings me into the meat of my talk, which is putting things in a greater context. Doing it safely, doing it legally, and doing it courteously. And if you thought that anticipation was a hard thing to find an image for, try courtesy. But ultimately it came down to, when you think of courtesy, you think of respect. And when you think of respect, you have to think of Aretha Franklin. So, doing it safely. First thing is, maintain proper following distance. And try to maintain proper buffers between you and the car behind you. As I said before, it's not always possible to do this. Some people are just jerks and want to get on you as fast as they can and follow as closely as they can. But at least you try. At least you can try to anticipate what they're going to do about it. And as I said before, anticipation, making sure that you can probably guess when there's a long line of cars behind you and they're going to get through, so that you can let them through with as little turbulence as possible. But also, you have to be well aware of changing situations and use proper discretion when doing these hypermiling techniques. For instance, there are times where traffic flow simply does not allow you to go slower, so don't. There are times where people behind you don't allow you to slow down on going up a hill, so don't. There are times where trying to use gravity to aid you down a hill will bring you way too close to someone, so don't. My point is, you really have to look at the situations around you and figure out what's best to use in that time. That is the crux of hypermiling in general, and especially on the highway when things are going at much higher speeds. It's of the utmost importance. So doing it legally, unfortunately I really couldn't find a whole lot to talk about with this, but recall that the speed limit is an upper limit. It's perfectly legal to go below the speed limit. There's usually I don't think around Wisconsin that much. There's unfortunately not a minimum speed posted, but usually it's within 10 to 20 miles an hour below the posted speed limit. So if you're within that range, you are well within your legal rights to do so. But however, obstructing traffic is illegal, which brings me to doing it courteously. For other drivers, as I said, if there's a long line of cars behind you, speed up and let them through without obstructing them. On two-lane roads, two-lane highways, where limited opportunities to pass, go the speed limit. Try figuring out ways that people behind you will not get mad at you. Or possibly use alternative or less busy routes. For instance, if you're going to La Crosse, you might want to try taking Highway 14 instead of I-90. It's actually a very lovely drive. I highly suggest you do that if you ever have to go to La Crosse. But there's another part of courtesy that you might not consider right away. It's for other passengers. Because with other passengers in the car, going slower doesn't just spend your time, it spends their time. So you might want to speed up. And some other passengers may not be too appreciative of you not using the AC or the heat that much. So use it a bit more judiciously. But remember that not everyone is always receptive of hypermiling, especially at first glance. So you might have to make a few concessions. But as a silver lining to that, it is about passenger miles per gallon, or PMPG, when you get to multiple passengers in your car. Basically, if you have 2 passengers in your car, and you manage to get 40 mpg, that's 80 passenger miles per gallon. But if you went all out and got 45 with just you in your car, that's still just 45. And it's an important thing because those people are going the same distance, you're effectively doubling your MPG in that case. Upshot is, speed up and take others into account. So the last question that does need to be addressed, it's a very valid question, is this all worth it? Is it worth it to go slow? Is it worth it to try out new things on the highway? And see, is it worth your time? Is it worth your money? And is it worth the amount of gas? One of the arguments that people like to throw out is that my time is worth more than the amount of gas that you save. But the question that has to be asked is, what is your time really worth? People speak as if every single second of their time is paid for by an employer. And if it is, then yeah, you have a very valid point. But in the other case, why not spend a little more time and save a little money on your time? But moreover, it doesn't really take that much time to go slower. It's just about 16 minutes more for a 100-mile trip going 55 instead of 65. 6 more minutes for going 65 instead of 70. This usually equates to, in a Prius, going from 50 miles per gallon to 55 miles per gallon, which is roughly equivalent to $7 an hour. Or going from, in a normal gas car, it could go from 30 miles per gallon to 33 miles per gallon, is roughly $12 an hour. But the other thing is, they often look in pure monetary terms, just what dollars per hour it is. What about reduced stress? What about not having to watch for speed traps? What about not getting speeding tickets? That's got to be worth some time and money, right? The other criticism they have is that it doesn't just save that much money or gas. And in the narrow scope, they're right. I mean, on a single trip going from one end of Madison to the other on the Beltline, you're not going to save that much money. Probably 20 cents, maybe 50 if you're in a low mileage vehicle. But what about the broader scope? I mean, on average, people tend to drive, 15,000 miles a year, maybe more. And suppose that half of those miles are highway. On average, you're going to save about 20 gallons and $80. Now, that doesn't seem like much, but that's a few weeks of groceries for me for free. I'll take that. But what about the really, really broad scope? What if everyone did this? Now, according to the United States Department of Transportation, Americans drove 3 trillion miles in 2006. Now, suppose again that half of these are highway miles. And according to the EPA, the average was just over 20 miles per gallon. So let's round that up to 21 miles per gallon, since on average, highway mileage is better. Now, suppose that we employed some of these techniques, and across the board, we got 21 miles per gallon to go to 25. That will save 11.5 billion gallons of gas, 224 billion pounds of carbon dioxide getting released in the atmosphere, and $46 billion saved. I want you to wrap your head around those numbers very quickly. $46 billion. $46 billion that's not going to oil companies, that's not going overseas. $46 billion that can be used for a whole lot of other things. Even just going from 21 mpg to 22, you're saving 3.2 billion gallons, 63 billion pounds of carbon dioxide, and $1.3 billion. So on a very broad scale, I believe that they're wrong. But ultimately, to me, it's worth it because it's fun. I really don't care how much gas I save. I don't care how much money I save. I consider it fun. It's a challenge. Anyone can drive 70. Not everyone can get 70 miles per gallon on the highway. But ultimately, the choice is yours. The choice is yours on whether or not to employ any or all of these techniques. And you're free to decide that I'm just full of crap, which I usually am. But I have a note, a final note and a plea to everyone, to anyone who's thinking about employing these on the highway. Please, efficiency is never worth safety or legality. Efficiency never supersedes them. So please be careful first and foremost. And a note and a plea to people who are never going to do this and who really, really like to drive 70. The person in front of you is not a jerk to be passed. They're not solely there to obstruct you from getting to your place. Please take that into consideration. So I thank you for your time. That's all for me that I have prepared, and I would like to open up the floor to questions now.